After 3 long weeks, Snow The Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, is back. I'm Russ Joy, at Joy on Broad, joined as always by the fantastic, the incredible, he's a heck of a guy, he's not a doll, Anthony SanFilippo, who you can find on Twitter, at AntSanPhilly. Anthony is munching over there on a cupcake to lead off the show.
Yeah.
This is a weird time for us to record. A few episodes ago, you were complaining that I woke you up at like 6 a.m. on a Sunday to record, and you didn't feel totally with it. And here we are. It's 11:30, and this is way past my bedtime.
Yeah.
And I waited up for, I think, about an hour past what I thought I was going to have to. So I, of course, turned on Bachelor in Paradise and had to watch all the commercials. The DVR didn't work, and I really hate myself for getting into the show. I don't know what's wrong with me. Well, I have a few ideas of what's wrong with me, but not that all notwithstanding. I thought, what do I do? I'm gonna kill time by watching this. And of course, I went to my cabinet and I heated up, and I don't know if anybody listening to this is gonna recognize this food, but Campbell's Raviolios, which I also claim are the only ravioli to be consumed in a can. And,
wait a second. Can I stop you?
Yeah.
Now, I know for a fact, even though your last name is Joy, I know for a fact that you have a lot of Italian blood in you.
That is true.
Okay. How the hell can you eat ravioli out of a can?
Your Honor, this man asked me a question that I don't think is very fair. I would like to have it stricken from the record.
Come on. I mean, there is nothing that's Italian that's canned that's good. Everything's fresh. That's what makes Italian food good.
Whoa. San Marzano tomatoes, imported straight from Italy. Those are okay in a can. Come on. You're going to tell me what do you... Never mind. We're not going to go there.
You're killing me right now.
There's a bit of childhood nostalgia because, I don't know if anybody listening would recognize this, but back in the day, they were called Garfield ravioli. And then they lost the rights to use the Garfield image. And the only place I can find them now is like at a Walmart in Norristown. So I don't know if that says about my selection of ravioli. But anyway, I ate that, got my second win, and here we are. That was a really way too long story to lead us back into the 3-week or so hiatus that we've had here on Snow the Goalie. And what kind of cupcake were you eating?
I don't know. It's a Hostess.
What? Hold on a second. What? Hostess? You didn't go with Tasty Cake?
I like Tasty Cakes. I really do. This one just happened to be sitting there in the fridge. It was a single by itself. It was one of those chocolates with the cream inside, and it's got like the
chocolate cream inside or vanilla cream inside.
No, vanilla cream inside.
Okay, that's fair.
It's got like the little white design,
the little
loop-de-loops.
Loop-de-loops,
whatever they're called. I don't know. It was just one single one sitting in the fridge.
Term. It's a culinary term.
I'm sure the kids put it in there, and whatever. I grabbed it at 11:30 at night, and
poor kids.
I had a long night, man.
I saved this Tasty Cake for myself. Dad, what did you do?
It doesn't matter. Yep, but the thing of it is, they always eat my stuff, so it's nonstop. Like that they're constantly eating what I bring home. So if I stole one of theirs, oops, big deal.
Yep.
I'm still minus 6,000 in my lifetime.
Yeah, and what I was gonna say, you're minus a whole lot more money. I'm finding that with 2 little kids. I can't imagine with kids as old as yours. I guess I get to find that out someday. Anyway, so we've got a little bit of Flyer stuff to talk about, of course, and get away from just our food preferences. Just wanted to, I think, address something really quick. We have talked about, having guests on in the past, and we've had Travis Sanheim and Ron Hextall. And part of the reason that we were on a delay for a few weeks is we were trying to nail down having a guest on. And, sometimes it just so happens that the scheduling and everything doesn't work out. And then I usually am the one to punt a few days where I go, hey, you know what, why don't we just wait and see if things pan out? And then, a couple days becomes a week, becomes 2, and then almost 3 weeks. But here we are. So, Anthony, do you want to make the announcement about who will be appearing on an episode at some point next week?
Yeah, no. So this is definitely happening. We'll be heading over to Voorhees, Flyers Skate Zone, and sitting down with an interesting guy, Alex Lyon. And people are like, "Well, geez, why are you getting Alex Lyon? You couldn't get anybody else." Fact of the matter is that as of right now, there is no other Flyers player skating over there who played for the team last year. There's some prospecty type guys and minor leaguers that are over there, but actually Alex Lyon's the only one who skated over there today. who played a game for the Flyers last year. But aside from that, he's actually a really interesting cat. I mean, he is really bright. He's a great interview. He'll be a phenomenal guy to talk to, just, about hockey and stuff, but also about things outside of hockey. He's fun. He's down to earth, and it'll be really kind of cool. So we're going to talk to Alex Lyon next week over at Skate Zone, and we'll air the show probably Thursday, right? I mean, if we're going to do the interview.
Give or take, yeah. So
at the beginning of the week, probably Thursday it'll air.
Yeah, so I'm also thinking, I kind of want to get his thoughts on the universe, and if he thinks it's so humongous big. I think these are really important things. And by the way, if anybody sits back and says, like, well, why would you get Alex Lyon? First of all, I would point to his 94 save performance for the Phantoms and say,
awesome.
I don't care how good or bad you think a player is. You make 94 saves in any kind of professional hockey game, you are certainly worthy of being interviewed. And yeah, I don't know. I'm actually pretty excited to hear from Alex, and especially, we've talked in the past about how there's still this goalie logjam that has not been resolved, and I'm going to be interested to see, obviously, how this pans out. But Lyon was one of the, going back to it, I think was one of the only 4 guys that were singled out by Ron Hextall in the interview that we did with him a few months ago as being somebody who he saw growth in, and I don't know. I kind of read in a little bit more, I think, to those names that Hextall dropped, and I'm still expecting them to, be guys that challenge for roster spots. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Alex Lyon up here, if not by virtue of him making it just on merit. We know that Neuwirth is likely going to get injured at some point when the team needs him most. So we know that Alex Lyon will be up.
What the interesting thing is, Russ? I'm pretty confident that Alex Lyon will stay with the organization. And that he'll be one of the guys that's playing probably beginning of the year at the AHL with the Phantoms. But I'm pretty confident that somebody's going to be out of here. Who that somebody is, we know it's not going to be Carter Hart. Beyond that, we don't know. I mean, it could be any of the other 4 guys, Brian Elliott, Michael Neuwirth. It could be Alex Lyon, although I don't think it will be, or Anthony Stolarz. All 5 are signed. And there's not room for 5 guys, so somebody's got to go.
Unless they have burgers and fries.
Yeah, but right now, I mean, it's smart, I think, for Hextall to keep all 5 guys and go into training camp with 5, and then let the chips fall where they may. And if all 5 are healthy toward the end of training camp, then okay, then you can move one. But you never know. I mean, with the amount of injuries that these guys have had, especially a guy like Neuwirth and even Brian Elliott last year, and Anthony Stolarz last year, it's probably worth having an extra guy at this point and then wait and see what happens. I don't think you're going to see any of them go down to the ECHL. I just don't. I don't see it. I don't think it makes no sense to start Carter Hart down there. It makes little sense to really hang on to Anthony Stolarz if that's where you're going to send him. And ditto Lyon. I mean, Lyon played at the NHL level last year and did fine. Why would you suddenly put him in the ECHL? So I don't think anybody's going to Reading. Or no, it's not even Reading anymore. It's that's right. They're in Maine now, the Maine Mariners. So it's I think somebody's going to be moved unless somebody gets hurt. But it'll probably come later in camp or right before the season starts.
So there we go. That's I think a pretty comprehensive way to look at it.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it. I think, and like I said, he's a fun guy. I mean, he's brilliant. He's probably smarter than everybody at Crossing Broad together.
Well, that's
like really, he's that bright. He's that smart of a guy.
I don't know if that's setting the bar kind of low for us or the bar extremely high for him, but that's fine. You got there's doctors, there's attorneys, and wow, all right, Alex Lyon is smarter than everybody else. All right, yeah, I was gonna say speak for yourself, but that's fine. All right, so it's everybody at the site.
We might have doctors and lawyers, but when it comes to sports, they don't have any degree whatsoever.
All right, that's fair. Well, you haven't seen me ball up in the post. It's okay. Take you down to the woodshed. Anyway. So really quick, that was one announcement we wanted to make. I think that's probably it on the interview front. There was a little bit of drama that I just wanted to address really quick. So there's kind of been this like passive sort of thing that's been going on between I guess our show and some of the fine folks over at BSH Radio. And I don't know what the total genesis of the whole thing is. It seems like people listen to both shows and then like tweet at one or the other about it. And just to address it really quick, I think I talked to Kyle about this on Crossing Broadcasts maybe like a week or two ago. I know, at least from my vantage point, I don't really have anything personal against anybody who does any of the podcasts for the Flyers. We obviously joke about being the only hockey podcast, but we've obviously acknowledged in the past that there are other ones out there. I just think, based on the feedback that we get and based on the fact that, so many people have presumably been flocking to Snow the Goalie, I'm just kind of getting the feeling that there's been a little bit of a sentiment of, wanting some change in the market. And I think the fact that this show has been able, and especially this is totally credited to Anthony, the fact that we've been able to get on people like Travis Sanheim, preparing for his first playoff run, been able to get Ron Hextall, we'll be getting Alex Lyon, probably be getting some other people, as the season starts to gear up. I think there's just going to be this kind of an inherent thing that's going to happen amongst any of the shows. And it's all a competition. And so like whatever listeners want to find and whatever kind of voice they want to listen to, like that is totally up to every listener. And I think that the only thing that I take issue with is when there's a broad stroke that's being painted against the site as a whole as being devoid of sports content. I don't think it's fair to people like Anthony and to Kevin Kincaid, who covers the Sixers, who had previously covered the Philadelphia Union as a beat writer. I don't think it's fair to them especially. I also don't think it's fair to Bob, who does all the Phillies stuff, who I would say, covers the Phillies about as well as anybody else in the city. And of course, they're contributors. We've got Coggin, who does, sometimes satirical things, sometimes, pretty well thought out things. Tim, who will come out of nowhere in our Slack chat with a notice that he has a post ready to go. And it's usually one of the better thought out things that we've read. And, Phil will jump in and contribute. Sometimes he likes to kind of light a fire under everybody in Slack and take a totally opposite perspective. And that's pretty great. But like, I don't think it's fair to attack an entire site because, it used to be of a certain style. It is a different site now. And that's the only thing I want to say about it. And just make sure that I guess we kind of get that part of this on the record. I don't really care what anybody else does. I just don't think it's necessarily fair to the hard work of the people who work for the site to, paint it as some kind of like sensationalist TMZ-esque site when that's just certainly not what it's been, at least for the last year and a half or so. So that was it.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay. So let's move on. Well,
but so, I know. No, I do. I will say this. This is what I will say. I do appreciate everything that you just said. And I do think that people are entitled to have whatever opinion they want to have. So if they like what we say, it's great. If they don't like what we say, it's a shame, but we're going to keep saying it. So we're going to keep doing our thing at Crossing Broad. It's a very good group of people. It's a very talented group of people, and I like everybody here. And I don't think we're going anywhere. So. So that's it. That's all I have to say. I don't pay attention really to a lot of stuff that goes on around us. I'm usually the last to know. I'm not in the Slack chat like you guys are as often. I drop in like Tim every once in a while with something to say, but I don't usually have it up because I'm doing so many other things. But I love the guys that we have, and I think that we're doing great work, and I think that we have a real impact in this city.
And I think one of the other things, as we get kind of prepped for this Flyer season is I think, for a site that covers all of the teams, I think that the hockey coverage that was provided, especially, by you for the very most part last year, and again, with like Tim throwing in contributions, where available, I always said that like the thing that I always like about your writing specifically is you recognize and acknowledge advanced stats, but it's not something that you need to like pop an Excedrin migraine before you read. You do it in a way that kind of synthesizes those stats and puts them into, including the human element. And it feels like so often in the city, and we talked about this on the episode that we did about the media, there's I think there's a big disconnect, especially in the Flyers beat writing core, of those who try to cover the human element, which I don't really see all that much of, those who try to, follow narratives or falsify narratives, you know who you are, Panaccio, and those who, really go all in on the advanced stats. And I think they all have a place, but I think, if they're not all kind of woven together, then I think you kind of alienate certain, parts of the fan base. So I think that maybe more than anything is something that I know at least last year when the whole site overhaul kind of started and you started putting your I was going to say pen to paper, your fingers to keyboard, I guess. That was a lot of the early feedback that had been coming back, was it was just a very well done thing. And that's kind of, I think, what you get from Kevin when he covers the Sixers, and that's what you get from Bob when he does the Phillies. So I'm just really happy with the work that goes on at the site. And yeah, that's that.
Well, thanks, Russ. I do appreciate that. And just so people know, I mean, my approach to it is always going to be, to try and provide insight into a game from a perspective of someone who, talks to a lot of people while I'm down there. The beauty of what I have to do is for Crossing Broad as a hockey writer is I don't necessarily have to have the story, written immediately after the game is over, unless it's an afternoon, Saturday or Sunday game, whatever. But most of the time I can just submit it at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock the next morning for people to read as soon as they get to their computer at work. So I have the luxury of roaming around the press box and talking to a scout or talking to a team employee who's up there and really kind of getting a different feel for what I'm watching below. While the other writers who, that they have a deadline to meet and that's what they're doing. And I'm not knocking them for that. I mean, that's the nature of their job. So I have a little bit more, leeway. And so therefore, when I go to put that story together, I want to offer insight that maybe you're not getting from somebody else. And it doesn't always mean that it's going to be what you're seeing on TV or what you're seeing live at the game or what you're hearing from the coach or what you're hearing from the players. It might be something completely different. And it might be a narrative that's not being told. And that's not because I'm trying to, I have an agenda that I want to push, but rather it's what I'm being given by people that are down there. And I will certainly try and appease all audiences, and that's why I include analytics. That's why I include the eye test for the old-fashioned fan. But I at the same time, so I try to meld those things, but I also want to meld them around what I'm being told, which is sometimes a different story than maybe what you're hearing from a post-game press conference or that you're reading in your next day's online coverage of the team. So, I mean, that's just my approach to it. And sometimes people are going to get frustrated with what I have to say because it is different. But sometimes people will appreciate it because it's different. So, the old adage, I think, that has never changed in journalism is if you're making 50% of the people happy and 50% of the people are mad at you, then you're doing your job correctly. And so the way I look at it is if there are people who don't like what I have to say and there are people who like what I have to say, then I must be doing something right. So that's how I kind of approach it. And I don't take anything personally. I've never blocked anyone. Isn't that crazy? Like, on Twitter, like you see all these writers who block people because they get mad at the commentary. I don't block anybody. If you have something negative to say to me, I'll respond to you. But I'm not going to block you. You're entitled to your opinion, man, and that's cool. I'll respond until we get to a point where it's ridiculous and I say, all right, that's enough. But I'm not going to block you. So, I mean, I just think that's. I mean, you're a fan and you're entitled to that, and that's great. So, and anybody's entitled to their belief and to their their take on the sport. Doesn't mean it's right, but they're entitled to it. And so that's kind of my approach to how I'm going to cover the team, and it's not going to change for 2018-19. I can promise you that.
It's something exciting to think about going forward. It's you set the tone well. And obviously it goes over well enough. I mean, you can be critical and then still get access to, Hextall and to these players. And so that obviously means that, the stuff that you're doing is respected and all that. So it's good. It's a solid thing. So let's move on. Let's actually talk about some hockey stuff now that we got some of that. We got the food done. We got the quasi drama thing done. So let's talk about something that actually immediately impacts the on-ice product for your team, your town, your Philadelphia Flyers. And that, of course, is the injury to Sean Couturier and what it means for the team going forward, at least in the interim. And actually, I solicited questions on Twitter, and one of them was from at Snazzy Shoes 82, who said, "What do you do with Coots?" You like that?
Snazzy Shoes?
Snazzy,
I love it.
Snazzy Shoes 82.
Snazzy Shoes. That's tremendous.
What do you
does
do?
Does the person have a name that goes with it? I just want to know
just DS.
Oh, just yeah. Okay. Snazzy Shoes is one of the great Twitter names ever. I love it. Go ahead. What's the question?
Is there a reason that you're so in love with it? Is it because the word snazzy doesn't exist in the common vernacular of the lay people these days? Like, what's going on?
It's not even that it's not common vernacular of the lay people. It's not common vernacular from your sports people, right? Like the reason we're recording at 11:30 at night is because I had a rehearsal. I'm directing a musical. All right, talk about
do a plug. Go ahead.
Right, talk about two extremes. I don't need to plug the fact that I'm directing Guys and Dolls at Players Club of Swarthmore, opening September 14th. You can get your tickets at pcstheater.org. I'm not going to plug that, but what I'm going to say
is that pay the sponsor money for that. Thank you so much. Don't forget, if you're interested in advertising on the Crossing Broad Podcast Network, including Snow the Goalie, Crossing Broadcast, It's Always Soccer in Philadelphia, Crossing Broad FC, and Crossed Up a Phillies podcast, reach out to me and I will point you in the correct direction. Go ahead.
No, but the thing of it is that like I hear snazzy all the time from the theater people. I never hear it in sports. So to get Snazzy Shoes coming at me with a hockey question, that's awesome. It's awesome. Don't change. I love it. Go ahead. What's the question?
Going to the plate is Jimmy Rollins with his Snazzy Shoes. All right. So yeah, that would imagine Merrill Reesaw. Never mind. I'm not going to just start cranking out impressions. I promise. There goes Corey Clement into the end zone for a touchdown. He has it because he's wearing snazzy shoes. Somehow that became also Jerry Seinfeld. All right, let's move on. So
that didn't happen tonight because they got shut out 5-0 by the Cleveland.
5-0. I know. It's like you look at it. It's like first quarter. Cleveland 5, Philadelphia 0. I'm like, oh, Sixers and Cavs are playing a real barn burner of a first quarter there. Oh wait, it's football. That's great. The worst part is that it ended 5-0. That's really bad. Anyway, so Snazzy Shoe says, what do you do with Coots? Hold him out beyond 4 weeks, surgery now, sign a veteran. I have my opinion on this really, really quick, and I think you'll offer a much more nuanced opinion to this, but to me, if surgery is necessary or surgery is really going to fix it and it's not going to take him out for a significant chunk of the season, I think you got to do it. I think this is something that happens far too often in hockey with an injury that probably should have a surgery performed. The player tries to tough it out. It's hockey. This is just kind of the way it is. And you saw what happened to Wayne Simmonds, especially in this past season, where there were obviously injuries that he had that should have been worked on, probably should have kept him off the ice. And he played through it and was kind of a shell of the same player. They cannot afford to have Sean Couturier playing at 70% to start the season, because everyone knows by the time the season kind of winds down, he's going to be at 40%. You can't have that for your top line center.
So 4 weeks tells, when they say it's a 4-week injury, it tells me it's a meniscus. Okay, if it was a ACL, MCL, PCL, LCL, whatever, those are longer term injuries and usually require surgery. Meniscus sometimes requires surgery, sometimes it does not. So to me, it kind of reeks of a meniscus that's a minor meniscus injury, maybe a partial tear or small strain or something of that ilk. And it makes a lot of sense because it's the same knee that he injured the MCL in last year. So when he's playing even though it's a charity game this summer, and it's a non-contact injury, it probably is, kind of the way he's still trying to, accommodate the old injury a little bit. And so it's maybe just shifts and turns and twists a certain way. So I don't think it's a major injury. Hockey players have had meniscal tears and played through them for years. That's just the way they are. It's not the difference between hockey. One thing that a lot of people fail to realize is that hockey injuries, some injuries in hockey are not nearly as dangerous or damaging as they would be in other sports, and vice versa. There are some injuries that aren't as bad in other sports that are far worse in hockey, and it's all because skating requires different, muscles in the leg and different way you're gonna actually play the sport that you're playing. So I don't think this is a major deal. And I see everybody reports, well, Ron Hextall said Sean Couturier is going to wear a brace this year. Well, guess what? There are 20 guys in that locker room wearing knee braces. I mean, seriously, guys wear knee braces in hockey all the time. I mean, it's more common than not that guys wear knee braces, and it's not necessarily because they have knee injuries. It's just a way to for stabilization. So I'm not surprised Sean Couturier is going to wear a knee brace. I don't think this injury mattered as far as the knee brace is concerned. And the fact that Hextall basically came out and said he'll be a participant in the second half of the preseason and even get games in, it tells me that this is nothing. If they were worried that this was like a serious or a semi-serious injury or had a chance to be something longer than 4 weeks, they would have said, we'll play it we'll see how he does as we move along here and just kind of update us through camp and really kind of, keep their cards closer to the vest. But when he comes out and says, oh yeah, he'll play preseason games, that means they know it's not a major injury and it's not going to be affect him in any way. So I don't think this is a big deal. I really don't. I know people want to make something of it and want to be like, oh no, we can't afford to lose Coots. It's not going to. There are other injuries that can happen related to the injury he had last year that would be concerning. This is not one of them.
So I guess that kind of transitions us into our next question from Twitter. That would be Joe Plaza, or Plaza, it depends on how you want to say it, I guess, at JEPlaza14 on Twitter, who says, do you think Frost and Vorobiev will get looks in training camp with Couturier out for most of it? Do either of them have a realistic shot to make the team? And also said, keep up the good work, guys. 2 exclamation points. It's serious when it's 2.
That's right.
Frost, we talked about it on the last episode. The organization currently is ranking Isaac Ratcliffe over Morgan Frost. Doesn't necessarily.
I wouldn't say that they're ranking him over him, but they just think he's closer. He's closer to being ready.
Yeah.
So that's what it is.
So then I guess that might be a slight addendum to the question that's being asked. Like if that's the information that we got, that they might think that Ratcliffe is more NHL ready, then I would expect him to play a bigger role in training camp going forward, right? Vorobiev, I don't know how Vorobiev necessarily will fit or get a look, but
here's the difference. So you're looking for a center, right? So that's why he's asking about Frost and Vorobiev, because they're centers, whereas Ratcliffe's a forward. So I find it interesting that he asked about Vorobiev ahead of Rubtsov, even though we said that they're not interested, that they're not happy with Rubtsov at this point.
Because Joe listens to the podcast and knows that the organization is very upset with Hermann.
I don't know. I think Frost is going to get a game probably, but I don't think he's really going to get a serious look. Vorobiev, I think, is one of those borderline guys. I think I mentioned Nick Aube-Kubel as a guy that you really keep an eye out for. I think that he's going to be.
He's making the team.
I think he is. He's
making the team.
I think he will. Again, he could come out and have a terrible camp and then not make the team. He's one of those guys that you can't sit there and say, oh well, he'll be okay come the regular season if he's not having a good camp. Like if Giroux goes into camp and he's terrible, they're not going to say, oh well, gee, Claude Giroux's done, and and move him down the lineup or bench him or anything. Right? That's not going to happen. But a young player who's got no NHL experience, those preseason games, they're the players that these games matter for, right? More so than anybody else. So I think that there's a way you can play yourself off of that list. But I think that they have enough guys there. I think that mentioning Jordan Wheel as a potential center is a possibility. I think that maybe Vorobiev gets a look. You still have Scott Lawton. You could always move Giroux back to center if
Don't
need
do it.
be.
Don't do it.
I don't think it's going to happen either.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if you needed to do it for 6-8 games until Couturier were ready, let's just say if Couturier was really injured, why not, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it could certainly.
I'd
be
rather
done.
them just move Patrick up to the top line for.
Well, they will.
For
but
a
you
small
still need
period.
you still need 4 centers, right? So I mean,
but I'm not as worried about the fourth line. Like if you just shift everyone up a line, or
I hear you.
or like experiment with Wheel as the fourth line center, like that's fine.
Yeah, I hear
but
you.
Like I don't want to change the way that the team plays, and the team, that top line will change if Giroux goes back to center. It's inevitably going to happen.
My biggest concern for the Flyers going into the season is that they don't really have a great third line. That's to me is where they're not good enough. I think that there's still a couple questions on the back end of the blue line. There's obviously a question in goal for now. And I think that I think the fourth line, to be honest with you, I think the fourth line is fine. I think they have enough fourth line type players who are good fourth line type players. But I'm not sold on where they're at third line right now. I'm just not. And it's not a knock on Oscar Lindblom or Wayne Simmonds or Scott Lawton, which is, they're probably the 3 guys who are going to, you're looking at for that third line. It's just not, it doesn't excite me.
I see Simmonds having a bounce back season. That's that I think is where you and I are going to disagree.
He could.
I think
he could have a bounce back season.
That if we were making a list of storylines to keep an eye on, I think there is such a high probability that Simmonds might in the immediate aftermath of recovering from these injuries, like maybe he gets off to a slow start in the first 6 or so games, but I would not be surprised if come trade deadline he's in double-digit goals at that point. He's usurped or supplanted, maybe not JVR, but somebody on the second power play unit. He's kind of worked himself back in there, and he's causing mayhem in front of goal. That would not surprise me, and then that kind of will lead us into the trade deadline of the question of do you blow the whole thing up? Do you mess up the locker room if you can get something of value for him? Because there's just really no way right now that I think we can build a scenario where the Flyers manage to keep or find the desire to keep Wayne Simmonds at what the cost is likely going to be. But I do think he's going to have a bounce back season. So I kind of disagree with you on the protection of the third line. I think it's there. And Oscar Lindblom having another year of, getting himself not only acclimated to, playing in the U.S., but really getting a full season of NHL hockey under his belt and not being put in a position where there's a ton of high expectations. I think there is a chance of it happening.
There's always a chance. I just don't think Oscar Lindblom is anything more than a defensive forward, and that's okay. You can have one of those guys, and he'll be a good one. I don't think he's going to be a big-time point producer by any stretch of the imagination. I like Scott Lawton a lot. I always have liked Scott Lawton. I think that there's a role for him on this team, and I think you're going to see him kill more penalties this year, and he's going to have a little bit more bite in the game than he's had before, but he's not an offensive player, so he's not going to score a ton of points. As for Wayne Simmonds, I think he can have a bounce-back season and still not score. If that makes sense? I think Wayne Simmonds can have a year where you watch him play and say, yeah, he looks a lot like the old Wayne Simmonds, and not going to put up 30 goals. Because you got to remember, when he was scoring 30 goals a season for the Flyers, half of those goals were coming on the power play. He's not going to be on the first power play unless there's an injury, which could happen. But I don't see where he's going to play on that first power play. To me, he's not even the first alternate to play on that first power play. Nolan Patrick probably is. Because you're going to go Voracek, Giroux, Van Riemsdyk, Gostisbehere. I guess Patrick can be. Maybe if you go 4 forwards.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. I mean, I guess.
Provy's got to be on power play 1, right?
Who?
Provy.
He's not. He was on number 2 last year. He was power play number 2 last year.
I think he gets bumped up.
So that's the thing. I don't know where Simmonds is going to get the goals. He's not going to score 30 goals playing on the third line
and power play
with Scott Lawton and Oscar Lindblom and the second power play. It's just not. That doesn't mean he can't have a bounce back season. He's just not going to be as productive. So that's why I don't like the third line. If there was a playmaker down there, if he was playing with Nolan Patrick, then yeah, okay, maybe he could do it. Maybe he can get at least 20, 25. I look at it right now, if he's got to play on that third line for a majority of the season, I think he's a 17, 18 goal scorer. And that's not a bad thing, but it's not, people are going to be disappointed. And that doesn't mean that he's not playing well. It just means he's not playing the role he used to play. I'm
really sad. I'm honestly really sad just at the prospect of Wayne Simmonds going out as a Flyer in his final season and kind of going out with a whimper. I don't want it to happen. I want him to really stick it to you.
I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I just and you never know. I mean, nobody's ever healthy. The team ever healthy the whole season, right? So if anybody in the top 6 gets hurt, well, then
Simmons moves up.
You move Wayne Simmonds up, and it's a good person to move into that spot, right? So
what if JVR gets now? I don't want this to happen. What if JVR gets hurt early in the season or middle of the season? JVR gets hurt. They put Simmonds into his role, both on the power play and on probably that first line, or maybe they've shuffled and he's second line. And Simmonds catches fire, and now all of a sudden you're in a spot where the guy that you ostensibly signed to sort of replace the production of Wayne Simmonds in that role is now thrown down to, like, do you then put him on the third line? Do you take a red hot Wayne Simmonds and put him back down on the third line? Like I could see this almost becoming like the backup quarterback controversy. And
in that case, in that case, who suffers?
Who's that?
Travis Konechny.
Yeah.
Because he's more versatile. Because you can move him down, and you can utilize his speed against another team's third line. Even if he doesn't score, it still brings that kind of value, that kind of possession value that you're looking for, driving the play kind of thing. If you're looking for advanced stats kind of stuff, that really makes teams tougher to beat. In a lot of ways, that's what teams that's the new age NHL. You want your third and your fourth lines driving play and having speed and dictating where the puck is, so that way that's where the metric is important. If you've got good possession numbers on the third and fourth lines, then you're going to be a good team, because the top lines, they know what their role is. Their role is to score the goals. But if the guys on the third and the fourth line are controlling the play and keeping the other team from having chances to score, then that's what makes you a good team. And that's why they always say that hockey is the ultimate team game, because you need those third and fourth lines to be important. And I think that's the one thing that I could say about this potential third line of Lindblom, Lawton, and Simmonds, if in fact that's what it is. The one thing I do like about them is I think that they're very defensively responsible, and they may not score a lot, but they're not going to hurt you on the ice either. So I just wish that there was a little bit more playmaking ability there, because I think you put too much pressure on the top 2 lines to provide all the offense, and it'd be nice if you could just spread it out a little bit more. I would almost trade a little bit of their solid defense for a little bit more offense from that group. But anyway, so yeah, that's why so he could serve a purpose on that role and can be a good player playing on that third line and not produce like he was before. And the fact of the matter is that if he does that, let's just say, here, we'll throw this one at you, Russ. Let's say we reach December and we're, 30 games into the season, and Wayne Simmonds at that point through 30 games has 6 goals. But he's playing really good defense. He's killing penalties. That third line is actually producing pretty well. Are people going to be down on him? Or because he's not Wayne Simmonds' 30-goal scorer? Or are the Flyer fans going to recognize that he provides so much more in other areas, and therefore they accept it?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like this is going to go into, it's not going to be like Pat Burrell territory, but it's going to be enough where, like, if he's only at 6 goals through 30 games, and it looks like he's got his speed back, his lateral quickness back, and he doesn't seem to be hampered by major injuries. If he's only got 6 goals, I think that there is certainly going to be a large segment of the fan base that's going to be down on him, but a lot of that is also dependent on the top 2 lines, their production. because if they're getting enough I guess enough points overall, not only at even strength, also at in the power play, if they're getting production from those top two lines, and it's even if it's lopsided, but they're able to win enough games, I think that is going to be the thing that kind of dictates if 6 goals is a disappointment or not. Because if they're not getting the production on the top two lines, then you start to look at a guy like Simmonds and say, well, he was somebody who could have helped in the past. Why isn't he helping now? And then it kind of gets into that whole, like, is he really not good enough to crack into those top two lines? So I think so much of it really does depend on the production of the other players on the team. I don't know if there's a scenario where there's going to be this like universal disappointment in him. Like 6 is low. But like if maybe,
but is it?
Yeah, I mean,
but like, is it through 30 games? Let's imagine. Let's say he plays a full season. Let's say he plays a full season, but I'm just throwing this out there. Let's say he plays a full season. That's like a pace for 16, 17 goals for the year.
Yeah.
Again, as a third line player, we're not talking top. We're assuming he's on the third line for 82 games, doesn't get hurt, whatever. Let's just and that's the pace he's on. Maybe if I'll bump it to 7, because if it's 7, now you're on almost a 20 goal pace.
Yeah,
right?
Seven's it's amazing how 1 goal, like 1 goal. Well, I don't know. I think it does a little bit. But again, like I would expect that 30 games into the season, there's an injury to somebody in the top 6, and he's had a shot to move up and to put the puck in the net, right? So, assuming all those things happen, then yeah, like 6 would be a disappointment. I guess to some extent 7 might be too. Like if this like JVR thing, plays out or something similar, Travis Konechny gets hurt, and you install Simmonds on top line or second line or whatever, if he's not able to, it doesn't necessarily just have to be goals either, right? Like if he moves up and he's doing the dirty work in the crease and he ends up, getting secondary assists or whatever, like that's fine too. Like as long as he's contributing to scoring plays, like then I'm fine. I don't know. I don't know if there really is that moment that everybody, I don't know if the city will turn on him. I think that Simmonds, for whatever reason, has done enough in his career to be in a spot where like I don't see people going out and explicitly hating Wayne Simmonds or getting so down on him that somebody says like he's stealing money from the team. Like I don't see that kind of scenario playing out. We can't say that about everybody on this team. Like if Claude Giroux and Jake Voracek have a rocky start to the season, it's going to be the same, schmucks who have been screaming for years that it's time to trade them. Like they're going to be out in full force. Simmonds, I don't know. Like I think people will probably make I don't know if it's an excuse, but they'll say, well, he had all those injuries last year. Well, he's getting older. And I think that he can go off with a whimper, but it'll be in a way where people are going to be appreciative of him. I don't see an ugly kind of divorce between the Philadelphia fan base and Wayne Simmonds. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I think it's a very astute answer, to be honest with you. And,
thank you.
I think you're probably right, and I think that there will be people who will be upset with it, and I think that that's your, people who don't quite understand there's other parts to hockey besides scoring goals and getting points. And I think there are people who will give him more than enough slack, maybe too much slack. Kind of like the Chase Utley people. When Chase was struggling at the end of his Phillies tenure, you couldn't say anything. You still couldn't say anything wrong about him, even though it was obvious that he wasn't the player he once was. I think there will be Flyers fans who do the same thing for Wayne Simmonds if that's Wayne Simmonds this season. And the reality is somewhere in the middle of that. And there's too few people who operate in that little middle area. But we'll try and stay there for you and offer you both the pluses and the minuses when we break it down as the season progresses.
Yeah, I think it's hard too. Like when I think about why the fan base really seems to side with Simmonds a lot, it's. I don't want this to become like the big race debate. But like when you think about the way that guys like, let's say, Odubel Herrera or Jimmy Rollins had kind of been despised by fan bases at certain points for things that have been said or what seemed like lackadaisical play, a lot of times sports talk radio will take that. There's one host specifically who really likes to take this when he's low on topics and build like 2 weeks worth of programming out of it, and then gets mad when people say that they would really prefer to talk about the team now and not Jimmy Rollins from 10 years ago and why he wasn't as beloved as Chase Utley 610. Anyway, when I think about like the way that those players are perceived. And a lot of times it feels like the narrative that it's based around is the fact that they're, African-American players, or they are Hispanic players. And, you have former club legends that come out and, speak about the fact that, Odubel Herrera can't be a leader because he doesn't speak English, like all that kind of nonsense. There's like this weird stigma, I think, that exists in baseball, where, I always kind of imagine that because Philly is such a diverse city, you would think that guys like Rollins, Howard, Ryan Howard, back in the day, and, even, like Latin American players would be a little bit more embraced, given a little bit more leeway than it seems like they might get in baseball. And I don't know if that's what the deal is with Simmonds, is that like he's one of very few, and he's written this before for Players Tribune, like he's one of very few black players in the NHL. And I don't know if it's just that Philly loves having somebody who seems to represent the diversity that's in the city in a sport that, truth be told, isn't that diverse. I don't know if there's a part of that, and if that's what it is, then that kind of flies in the face of, what we've seen with the baseball team. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I do know that, I think the more people got to learn about Wayne Simmonds and kind of learn about the guy, and, the piece that he wrote, was it for the Players Tribune? It was, what was it called? The Astronaut, right? Where he wrote about the candidacy for the Hockey Hall of Fame. Why is the guy's name escaping me?
Willie O'Ree.
Willie O'Ree, that's right. When you started to read the way that Simmonds kind of talked about him and him as a trailblazer, and you start to learn more about the way that, Simmonds, by virtue of being a minority player in this league, the way that he impacts, his home community and also the greater Philadelphia area in promoting diversity in the sport, I think there's just so much about the guy that the city is drawn to, and it it obviously transcends race. I think there's just a lot of reasons that the city is behind him. And I think that's kind of why this whole thing, like whether or not he has what we would consider to be a bounce back year, or if he has another what we would consider to be a disappointing year, I just don't see the fan base turning on him in any way. And I think if they do, it would be a shame.
Yeah. And that's, again, another... No, it makes sense. It totally makes sense. So, I mean, look, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I mean, Flyers are going to they're going to do some stuff before the season kicks off in October. They're going to do some things. So
they're getting Erik Karlsson, is what you're saying, which actually would answer Justin Kint's question on Twitter at Justin Kint, who said, "Would you trade for Erik Karlsson, and who is off limits?"
I'm not sure anybody's off limits.
What? Ooh.
I think Erik Karlsson's the best defenseman in hockey.
Okay.
Okay.
He apparently does not want to play for any Canadian team.
Yeah, I saw that. So we narrow it to 23. Okay. And here's why I think the Flyers could. And I'm not gonna. I don't want to get anybody all worked up because I don't have any firsthand knowledge of this. But I think the Flyers could be a rational team that he would want to go to, and I'm not saying right now. It could end up being after next season. He could be 2 years before he comes here. Point is that he wants to play in the U.S., and I get it, and a lot of that has to do with the dollars, right? I mean, it sucks to play in Canada when the dollar is not that good there, right? It's not strong there. And team players have always said that. There's a lot of players who've always wanted to play in the U.S., but I think Karlsson wants to get away from the scrutiny of the Canadian media because they're oppressive when it comes to hockey. I'm not just saying that, in general they're oppressive. I don't think they are, but I think that when it comes to hockey, they treat it like it's life in Canada. And, Karlsson's a bit of a quiet guy, and he doesn't want to, deal with that anymore. Not to say that, you come to a city like Philadelphia and suddenly we'd have to deal with us, which might not be all that much better than what it is. Because I've always said that coverage of hockey in Philadelphia is not that different than it is in Toronto. That said, I think if you really look at, okay, who are the American teams that have the prospects that are necessary to pull off a trade with Ottawa, because Ottawa's not going to give them away. Ottawa's going to hold out for the best possible deal. And if you look at, the top prospect lists that are being put out there, and, there's several of them, and, but who ranks near the top? Okay. Well, there's a bunch of Canadian teams. I can tell you that. Vancouver is frequently listed up there. The Maple Leafs are pretty high. Calgary is always considered high, and Winnipeg's got a bunch of really good players. But if he's not going to play in Canada, he's going to go to the United States. So who's got the prospects in the U.S.? Well, the Flyers. We know this, right? So they are ranked near the top of almost everybody's list. Arizona, but you got to remember they're being run by the league. Nobody really wants to play in the desert, so I don't see that. I mean, they got a lot of good young talent, but I don't see that as a destination location for Erik Karlsson. Carolina, I think, is an interesting one. It's a smaller market. It would probably be somewhere he would be really comfortable. And they got a bunch of really good young players. They have a really young blue line, and he would really become the anchor of it. So that's one that I think is a legitimate spot for him to go. And the only other one that I think that maybe has the prospects to get it done that's a U.S. team is maybe Tampa. I don't know.
You don't think Jersey?
No, I don't think Jersey has the prospects to get it done. I don't. I think that I don't think they're that great. I'm not even sure Tampa's is good enough. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing it out there because they're ranked a little bit higher than most American teams, but where they're really good at Tampa. They're really good at drafting depth, like third, fourth line guys, which I already mentioned is an important thing. But the Ottawa Senators are going to be looking for a top tier type of prospect to come back their way in a trade for Erik Karlsson. So, while Tampa makes a lot of sense because they're on the doorstep of being a Stanley Cup team, I think the Flyers are in the mix. I do. I think the Flyers are a team that could afford to trade the kind of the depth that they have in their system to get a player like Erik Karlsson. Although I still think Carolina might edge them out ultimately, but I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we hear that rumor starts to come out that Ron Hextall has kicked the tires on Erik Karlsson. Just saying.
The only thing that I can think of that would be bad is the potential eating up of any remaining cap space unless you were to trade an NHL salary. So I don't know if Wayne Simmonds is a guy that would intrigue the Senators as a veteran piece to go along with a prospect. I don't know if that's something that the Flyers would pursue.
It's not enough.
But I'm saying to include as a way to kind of offset some salary so that you still have some cap flexibility if you need to or want to make an acquisition leading up to the trade deadline, where you don't feel like you have to trade one of your key contributing vets at that point. I don't know if it's something they consider pursuing, but to me that at least financially could make a little bit of sense. I don't know. Karlsson would be a great addition. The issue, of course, and I think this kind of issue has been compounded by the signing of JVR for the average annual value of that contract and the term length is they've kind of eaten up so much of their future cap, and they've continued to add to what has been a top heavy set of forwards. Luckily for them, they have such great depth on the defensive side that they don't necessarily need to go out and acquire a lot of big time defensemen when you have such great organizational depth at that position, and you have a few guys that are going to be coming off the books at the end of the season who are defensemen who are going to hopefully be giving up their spots if they aren't beaten out in camp for those spots to guys like Phil Myers, and obviously we hope Sanheim is up. So I don't know. I'm not opposed to adding a big time defenseman, especially one who's as talented as Karlsson. I think that's the thing that kind of puts you over the top within the division.
I'm gonna throw this just a complete hypothetical trade at you.
I say no,
and see if you say yes or no. Would you trade Konechny, Sanheim, and one of your goalie prospects like Felix Sandstrom for Erik Karlsson?
Say it one more time.
Konechny, Sanheim, and like a goalie prospect like Felix Sandstrom. Not Carter Hart. He's obviously their top goalie prospect, but maybe your next best goalie prospect, Felix Sandstrom.
All right, so can I be honest?
Go ahead.
I know that Konechny is only 20. I worry that the projection and the expectation of what Konechny is going to grow into is higher than what I think the reality is going to play out for him. So I guess I look at him as somebody who I think is going to max out at like 60 points maybe in a season, and it's still really early in his career, and so that's obviously not a given. So at that point, it's effectively like I don't see a way that Sandstrom ends up becoming a key contributor to the team, especially because you think that you have the goalie of the future in Carter Hart. So Sandstrom to me is kind of what it is. At that point, it's trading Karlsson for Sanheim. So yeah, I guess I would, yeah. If I know that I have a deal worked out, a long-term deal with Karlsson, and it's not going to abolish all cap space that Ron Hextall worked so hard to get you out of that cap hell that you were in. Yeah, I think you have to, because again, and this kind of I guess comes back to whose question was it? It was Steve Appleman at Snap1E to be Snapple Apple on Twitter. He said, "How would you rank the Flyers in the Metro right now?" He said, "I would put the Flyers third behind Pittsburgh and Washington. I think the Flyers are a little bit better than Columbus and have better top-line talent." Well, if the goal here is to win the division and to become a legitimate contender, Travis Sanheim and Konechny don't get you there right now. In a few years, they do, and at that point, you kind of have to, as an organization, I think, determine when is your best window to go for it. Voracek and Giroux only have X amount of years left, for them to be highly productive players. So, is it going for it in this window, or are you looking to punt until Konechny continues to develop? The defensive core is strong and are in their third or fourth years. Nolan Patrick has established himself as the top line center, and that you have Sean Couturier as a very competent and useful second line center. Like, is that the window that you think is best? Do you continue to ride out the ending years of Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Alex Ovechkin, or do you also acknowledge that there are other teams that have young stars in this conference that you're going to have to fight with? I don't know what the answer to that organizationally is with the Flyers, so I think that's also part of it. For me, yeah, I think it makes sense. I think it would hurt. I think any trade that you make that is a good trade and is a fair trade is going to hurt both sides. So it gives Ottawa back, I think, too much value. But that said, I think it's enough to put the Flyers over the top and make them a legitimate contender in the East.
So you would do it?
I would. That was a really long answer to say yes.
Yeah, I mean,
but I had to kind of have to reason the whole thing out.
Well, I hear you.
It's so much value. Like, the goalie prospect is like I think is pretty meaningless at that point. Like, I know that there are a lot of people who believe in Sandstrom, but Carter Hart is the guy. Hopefully, right? Yeah. So then it really is. Do you trade two young players for Karlsson? Yeah, I think you kind of have to.
There might have to be more to it than that. I was thinking about it. They might have to throw in another guy, another prospect-y kind of guy.
How about Herman Rupsov?
Well, could be. I mean, and even still, I would still do it. Really, the only guy, there's only one player, one young player that I would not trade right now, and that's Provorov for Erik Karlsson.
I wouldn't trade Patrick either, but go ahead.
I might.
You would?
I might.
Oh no!
I know it would set you back a little bit on the with your center depth, but I might. Yeah,
dude, we've been talking for how long about the fact that the Flyers don't have good center depth, and you want to take probably their second best center
for the best defenseman in hockey.
Yeah, but
the best defenseman in the game. He's a difference maker. He is that
he's
good.
He's a big cap hit, and you're talking about getting rid of a low priced.
I got it. I understand.
I don't like the logic of that. I know what you're saying, but I don't like it at all.
But I'll tell you right now, he's got more value for the next 3 or 4 years.
Sure, he does. Yeah.
Yeah, and so if you're saying, I mean, ultimately this comes down to when you decide that you're going to go for it. Are we entering that time period? Does the signing of JVR tell you that? I don't know. I mean,
All right, so let's play this hypothetical. So Sanheim, Konechny, Sandstrom are all gone. Karlsson's here. Where does this team finish in the Metro?
They could finish second.
Could they? Again, behind who?
They could finish second. Well, so I still think Pittsburgh's the best team overall.
I agree.
In the division, and Washington's the defending Cup champ. I mean, so you can't forget that. That said, I didn't think that they had a great offseason. And there's always that hangover kind of thing, hangover effect that could happen. I still think they're going to be right there. I would probably still pick Washington second, but I could see the Flyers finishing with Erik Karlsson on this team. Yeah, I can put them ahead of the Capitals. Without him, though, I think that they're maybe third, but maybe fourth, maybe fifth. Like I think that they're right in that next group. I think it's Pittsburgh right now. I think it's Pittsburgh, Washington, and then a group of 3 or 4 teams in that division that could finish anywhere from 3, 4, 5, 6, without a problem. And that's what that to me is why they I don't think that the Flyers have done enough to separate themselves from that group. You trade for Erik Karlsson, you've separated yourself from that group. That's the thing. And so you have to make a decision. If you're Ron Hextall, when is the time to try and separate yourself? To me, this is a time to do it. I think this is a good time to do it. I'm not certain that they will, but I think this is a good time to do it. I think that he's ultimately waiting for a goalie, to be honest. I honestly look at it and say Hextall, and I think Hextall goes, I can't win a Stanley Cup with Brian Elliott or Michael Neuvirth.
Probably with Alex Lyon, though, but not those other two, because Alex Lyon has gotten the Snow the Goalie stamp of approval. But I think you're probably right. But if that's the case, then you're not. Then you're obviously not going to trade Patrick Sanheim Konechny. So you're hypothetical.
But first of all, let me say this. Let me say this. When I say I would trade Nolan Patrick, not with all those other guys as well. Nolan Patrick obviously is higher up on the food chain than Konechny and Sanheim. So if I'm trading Konechny, Sanheim, Sandstrom, even if I have to throw in Herman Ruptsov, okay, fine. But if I have to trade Nolan Patrick for him, I would still do it. But that's all you're getting. You're not getting.
So it's a 1-for-1.
Yeah, you're not getting multiple other. I mean,
Ottawa doesn't do that deal there.
Well, no, I could see maybe throwing in, some depth players, a couple of depth guys, but nothing.
Could I interest him in Jori Lehtera? He's a great veteran leader.
That's the kind of thing. Like you might have to say, all right, we'll give you Nolan Patrick, but you have to take couple of our bad contracts. Maybe you take Jori Lehtera. Maybe you take Andrew McDonald.
That man is a top pair defenseman. I will not have you slander the great name of AMAC.
I don't like the slander of Andrew McDonald, but I can certainly recognize that he's got a bad contract.
I like the slander of Andrew McDonald with a cup of tea in the morning.
But I mean, so that's the thing. I mean, so it's a completely different trade at that point. But I
don't like it. Don't get me in these awful hypotheticals. This is upsetting.
I know, they're all hypothetical. There's nothing to it. We're just having a conversation. But I mean, that's how much I like Erik Karlsson. That's really how much of an impact player I think he is. And wherever he goes, and even if it's not the Flyers, wherever he goes, he will immediately make that team a contender.
He's Kawhi Leonard. There's your crossover.
That's a fair comparison.
He's Kawhi.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comparison.
I mean, let's be honest. Kawhi currently plays, wink wink, for a Canadian team. He's not re-signing in Canada. Erik Karlsson doesn't want to re-sign in Canada. And you know why? Because Canada's to blame for everything. Anyway, blame Canada. I think we had one other question that came through.
Go ahead.
Barry Schaefer, at Barry Schaefer 13, said, when do you think Nolan Patrick will surpass Sean Couturier next season if he progresses in 3 years, or he won't until much later on, if ever? What do you think?
I don't think it's a great question, because I value Couturier so much more because of things that he does that don't show up on a score sheet. I was one of his biggest supporters for all those years when people were saying, Trade Couturier, he's not good enough, blah, blah, blah. Like, I've liked him since day one. When he was 18 years old and he was killing penalties in the playoffs and shutting down Evgeny Malkin, like, I was sitting there saying, my God, this kid's going to be really good. And I still think he's just scratching the surface of what he can be over the course of the next, 7-8 seasons. So I'm a big Couturier guy. Nolan Patrick has more natural offensive ability than Sean Couturier. It's just, there's no question. The kid's got really good hockey sense. He has a nose for the puck around the net. And it took him a while to kind of figure it out, but he started to figure it out a little bit. I don't think he can play a lick of defense. I don't think he's anywhere close to Couturier on the defensive side of things. And that's a big part of it for me, because half the game you have to play defense. And I like a guy who's, I don't need everybody to be a top-end defensive forward. I mean, Giroux's not a top-end defensive forward. He's, mediocre on the defensive side. Sometimes he's good. Sometimes he's not good. So, I mean, I don't need Nolan Patrick to be a good defensive center in order to appreciate him or think that he's a top-tier player. That said, I think that's something that kind of keeps Couturier ahead of him. Patrick can outscore Couturier. Patrick can be a 70-point player, and Couturier can be a 60-point player, but Couturier be more valuable because of what he can do. So, if I had to pick, when you say when does he surpass him?
If ever.
Couturier is 6 years older than him, so I guess at some point Couturier will eventually slow down a little bit, and Patrick will still be in his prime, so I can see that happening down the road. So I won't say it'll never happen, but I think we're a ways off. I think it's a little bit of time yet before that's the case.
Wait till Nolan puts 38 goals up this year.
Yeah, I get it, and that's not to say that Nolan Patrick goes past him and plays on the first line, and Couturier drops to the second line. Well, he means he passed him. It only means he's passed him on a depth chart. I don't necessarily means he will have passed him as far as ability. You know what I'm saying? There's so many different ways of answering this question or even asking this question. So it was asked almost kind of vaguely and left it up for interpretation. So the way I'm interpreting the question, I would still say that the value of Couturier will remain higher than the value of Patrick for at least the next 5-6 seasons.
Wow. I think he does it in 3 years, to be honest. But I think a lot of it comes down to what you're actually valuing, because at that point I think Nolan will have supplanted Couturier as the top line center, and then I think it gets into flashy stats versus the overall game, and I think that's going to be kind of the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, because I think at some point when if and when Nolan's scoring around 30 goals a season, if that is the path he ultimately ends up on, or he becomes like a 75, 80 point guy, then like flashy stat wise, if he's not playing a ton of defense, like I don't know, we stack that up against Sean Couturier, who's still putting up modest numbers on the second line, being more of a facilitator, and then being somebody who we know is going to still be one of the best defensive forwards in the game. I don't know. I guess it really will come down to what the person evaluating really believes about each of those guys and what's more valuable to the team.
Yeah, and I always think that a guy who plays Couturier's style is the most valuable style you can have for any forward in hockey. I just think that that's it. I mean, I think he's a prototypical player. Like, if you had to create a player, obviously, you could sit there and say, oh, well, I want, Connor McDavid, or I want Sidney Crosby, or I want Alex Ovechkin. Yeah, they're all great players. And they're all, among the best players in hockey. But if I was to say, clone one guy and have 12 forwards just like him, or clone one guy, have 6 defensemen just like him, I'm not saying that Couturier would be first on my list, but he'd be up there. He'd be near the top, certainly more so than Nolan Patrick would be. Let's put it that way.
All right. Before we go, there are 2 things that I want to do. And of course, I want to end the episode as we end every episode now with the 4th edition of Who's That Flyer? And I have a good one. I have a good one queued up for you.
Okay.
But really quick, we talked about this off air. The Eagles, and we mentioned a little bit earlier, the Eagles played to a 5-0 loss to the Cleveland Browns today. We're recording this. Wow, it's now Friday at 12:39 a.m. Do you know where your children are? And we were talking about people getting super hyped up about Eagles preseason football. It's something that I used to really love, and I feel like this offseason was just so uneventful, and this preseason is just a thing where, like, I don't see any real value to trying to evaluate anything. I think it's funny how quickly people have turned on Nick Foles. He hasn't had a good preseason, but, like, it is what it is. Like, he just won you a Super Bowl, and now there's like the wisdom in the city seems to be, if you are piling on Nick Foles, you're either a total jerk because you're unappreciative, but if you don't jump on him, it's you've gone soft now that the team's won a Super Bowl. Don't you want to repeat? I can't get into preseason football this preseason. So many of the elite players that they have at wide receiver have not played. They were playing Smallwood as the 4th running back today got the start. Matt Jones got benched. Like, do you find any enjoyment in preseason football?
The only sport that I find any enjoyment in exhibition season is baseball. And it's only because, well, 2 reasons. One, it takes place in a warm weather location, so if you're actually there, it's kind of cool. It'll just kind of be like getting away from the winter in Philly and go down to Clearwater and, hang out and watch some baseball, even though the games don't matter. It's kind of cool. But secondly, it at least offers you a glimpse at the players and what they're going to do. And as the exhibition season in baseball progresses, the guys go from getting, 1 at bat a game and pitching 2 innings to throwing 6 innings and playing a full game by the end. And so, like, you really get to kind of see that progression for the players as they're gearing up for what will be their regular season. No other sport does this happen. Football may be the worst. And next week's game will be a total joke because it will consist of, of the 53 guys who are going to, or whatever, however many they're allowed to dress for the preseason, like, most of them won't make the team. So what the hell are we watching it for? Other than the fact that we're degenerates and we gamble, right? I mean, what else could you possibly be watching that game for? Preseason is terrible. The Eagles have looked awful in preseason. Does that mean I think they're going to be an awful team? No, they're going to be a good team. They're going to be just fine. And this is it's asinine and it's no different in hockey. The only guys that hockey preseason matters to is, like, there's like 2 or 3 guys. And look, you want to talk about a sham. The Flyers will open training camp on September 14th, right? They will cut down to 25 guys by September 19th. It'll be 5 days into camp, and they'll already have sent people to the Phantoms camp, the minor league camp. Like, they already know. They know who they're bringing in. They know who they want their lineups to be. They have maybe 1 spot or 2 spots on the roster where they have question mark. Most teams where you have a question mark and say, it could be this guy, it could be that guy. Okay, fine. But the rest, it doesn't matter. None of it matters. These guys, to play these preseason games, all you do is risk these guys getting hurt. Nobody's getting into game shape. That's why the beginning of the hockey season is so dreadful. Games in October and November go so slow and whatever. That's why, you'd sit there and say, wow, that game played at a much faster pace. It was like a playoff game. No, it's just at the beginning of the season, these guys don't care. They're not trying to get themselves really, really ready. They get themselves to a point that they know is acceptable, but they're not out there giving 110% in September and October. It ain't happening. It doesn't happen in the NBA. Certainly doesn't happen in the NFL. Let's just blow up the preseason entirely. Like, just get rid of it. Get rid of it. College football has it, right? They have no preseason games. They just go and play, right? Just play. Just play the games. You want to make the seasons a little bit longer for some reason? Okay, fine. Like I know football's talking about that. Go ahead, knock yourself out. Add 2 more games. Good.
Don't say knock yourself out. They're going through a lot of CTE stuff, Anthony. Be sensitive, okay? Jeez.
Oh man.
Try to find a little bit of sensitivity in your body, okay?
No, I can't stand preseason sports. And I never.
You know what? I think you're right. We should put a lot more stock into to things like spring training and baseball. You know, it's not like you can have a young prospect hit around 400 for spring training, get a big contract, and then it's not like he's going to crater and hit like 225 for a negative 1.2 WAR on the season. Not like that would ever happen to a king or anything. So yeah, you're totally right. Baseball is infallible. So there we are.
No, I didn't say it was infallible. I didn't say it was infallible.
You're right. You didn't.
I
I put those words in your mouth, and it's fine.
Yeah, it's just that you could see a progression for a player. And I mean a veteran player as much as I mean a young player. There's always a risk with a young player. That's why when Kingery, I mean, we don't have to get into baseball talk here on the hockey podcast, but that you always have to be careful with a guy like Kingery because he had never played in the majors before. Whereas you could sit there and watch Aaron Nola. And the first start of spring, maybe he only throws 2 innings. And so, okay, great, whatever. He looked okay for those 2 innings. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he got hit around. Maybe he was just trying to throw his breaking stuff and no fastballs, whatever he was working on. But then if you watch every game, and his next start, okay, now he's going to throw a little bit more. He's going to throw 50 pitches this game. Oh, okay, now he's going to throw. And then you could see that progression and be like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like you can kind of see how they're getting themselves ready for the season. Whereas in the other sports, these games, they're just trying not to get hurt. And it's terrible. It's terrible.
You want to talk about something that was terrible? This is one other really quick thing. So I was saw on the Sports Center Twitter account, they put up Diana Taurasi from the WNBA. Many considered to be one of the greatest players, if not the greatest player of all time in WNBA history. So she got mad, I guess, because one of her opponents put up a picture of this opponent put up this picture of herself kind of getting like super hyped behind Taurasi. It must have been after a win or something. It said, "Go time, playoffs, baby." And Diana Taurasi at 2 different points in this game, including after the final buzzer, was clapping at this woman's face and said, "Who's clapping now? Female dog." Anyway, I thought that was kind of fun. Now it's time for a 4th edition of Who's That Flyer? Anthony,
you should have some. You should have some music for this.
I could. That would take time. And it's too late for that.
No, I'm not saying just for future. Think about this for next week.
To edit it in. Okay, we'll take recommendations. Anybody?
Some kind of game show music.
Let's put this out to the people. If there's anybody out there who's an audio engineer or enjoys doing editing of audio, if you or someone are a songwriter or a musician, and you want to write or put together a little Who's That Flyer music, feel free to do so, and then reach out to me on Twitter at JoyOnBroad, and I will put it up for consideration. Anthony, I mentioned before that I'm worried about the potential of Travis Konechny. Now, for those who may forget, in 2017-18, in his age 20-year-old season, Travis Konechny scored 24 goals and 23 assists for a total of 47 points. The last Flyers forward to have those exact numbers came as a rookie about 6 or 7 years ago. Name that Flyer, Anthony. Who is the Flyer who most recently scored 24 goals, 23 assists? And I will tell you this. He was considered to be a front runner or one of the front runners for the Rookie of the Year.
So you're basically saying that it was a 47-point season.
With 24 goals and 23 assists exactly.
Wow. Huh.
Wow.
That's an interesting question.
If I give you the specific year, will it help? I don't want to go too specific. I want to give the people some time. It was a Flyers rookie who finished 4th in the Calder Trophy standings.
Interesting. I'm having a hard time with this one. 24 goals, 23 assists.
He played right wing. He had the most
Who had-
fourth
who had
place
20
votes.
Who had 24 goals as a rookie in recent years? Oh, I know who it is. That's a good question. I know who it is.
All right,
was on
go ahead.
the team last year.
I do believe so. Yes, Anthony.
Yes, he was.
Yes, he was.
As a matter of fact, was the winner. I did a segment when I worked for the Flyers, a video segment, and people may remember this. I did a video segment. We actually went down to what's the name of that? The Constitution Center to meet Will Ferrell and Zach Galifianakis. And we did a Will Ferrell movie trivia quiz thing on the ride down. And in the car, we were in a minivan. It was me. We had a guy driving, the cameraman shooting, and it was me, Zach Ronaldo, Sean Couturier, and this guy who knew every Will Ferrell reference possible, Matt Reed.
Matt Reed is correct. Ding, ding, ding. That is the 4th edition of Who's That Flyer? I'm glad you enjoyed that. That was good.
That was a lot of that was a fun time. I wish that video was still around somewhere. That was funny. It was like Matt Reed knew all of and Coots knew nothing. Like he knew none of them. He knew none of the references.
You know nothing, Couturier.
I was reading lines from Will Ferrell movies, or Zach Galifianakis. I think I was doing for both, and Zach Ronaldo knew a few. Couturier, because I think Couturier got one. I think he actually got one, and he was like really pumped that he got the one that he got. But Matt Reed knew like all of them. He was such a savant, a Will Ferrell savant. So it was really kind of fun.
That's awesome. That is the insight that you can only get here at Snow the Goalie. So with that, Anthony, we have 2 new iTunes reviews, 5 stars. I guess we should read those off because unlike Crossed Up, your other show where you don't read your reviews.
I never remember. If you were on the show, Russ, I mean, we would, you know what you should do? You should edit yourself in at the end.
Nope.
Saying, "Hey guys, here's your latest reviews."
Nope. People, I think people are already fed up with my voice enough as is. All right, so. That's kind of a reprieve on the Crossing Broad Podcast Network. So, the first review is by Adam Arnold 14, who said, really great podcast, 5 stars. It's refreshing to have a Flyers podcast with such quality insight into the underappreciated farm system. Thank you. And the second one was by Chris Kringle, 1977. Reeks of awesomeness, 5 stars. The episode that dropped on August 2nd is the best one yet, with great insight on the Flyers' intended off-season moves and the organization's opinion on prospects. Russ and Anthony have great chemistry and provide a balance of strong opinions with solid hockey knowledge. Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Adam. Don't forget to go check out Snow the Goalie on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, all of those lovely places that we have it, and wherever else you get your podcasts, but especially if you can snag an Apple device or get yourself onto iTunes and leave a 5-star review. That helps us in the rankings. It helps us continue to get the message out about the podcast. And then, of course, do that for all the other shows on the Crossing Broad Podcast Network, including Crossed Up, a Phillies podcast with Anthony and Bob Wankel, who you can find on Twitter at BW Crossing Broad. Go find Phil Keidel, co-host of Crossing Broad FC, on Twitter at Phil Keidel. That's Keidel. It's not hard to spell. It's Phil Keidel. And of course, Kevin Kincaid, who you can find on Twitter at Kevin Kincaid. That man hosts It's Always Soccer in Philadelphia. They dropped a new episode I was listening to today. So, and of course, Crossing Broadcast, a show that I co-host from time to time with the site's founder, creator, and extraordinaire. That would be Kyle Scott, who you can find on Twitter at Crossing Broad. So we haven't really talked about it, and I think it's going to be something that Kyle and I will go more into detail on the next episode. So we've been so spotty recently with our programming, and then he made the announcement on Twitter. So now it's kosher to say he and his wife invited their second child into the world on his birthday. And so I think that's played a little bit of a role here. Is the anybody who has a spouse who has given birth, the last few months especially, I think, are a bit of a slog and can throw you off your game a little bit. So congratulations to that family, the Scott family, and they now have a second child, and little Kyle is now a big brother, and that's very exciting. So don't forget to go send your congratulations over there to Kyle and his wife and the family. So That's positive. See that, Anthony? We ended on a nice, positive, warm, fuzzy note.
That's awesome.
We started with a cupcake. We end with childbirth. This has been Snow the Goalie, part of the Crossing Broad Podcast Network. And of course, if you are interested in sponsoring one of the shows or all of the shows, don't forget to reach out. I guess probably to me. I'm probably your best line of communication for that. And we will, engage you in that conversation. It's a great way to get, especially for small businesses that might be listening. It might not be as cost prohibitive as you might expect. And it is a great way to get your message out about your business to thousands of listeners every week on the Crossing Broad Podcast Network. So consider that and go check out the other shows, rate them 5 stars, leave reviews and all that, and we will read them on the shows. So until next time, I guess it'll be next Thursday with an interview with Alex Lyon. That's Anthony at SanFilippo. I'm Russ.
I thought you were going to forget. You mentioned everybody else's Twitter handle. I thought you were going to forget mine.
Hey, buddy, I started this whole thing with you. I can't forget you. I'm so hurt that you thought I would forget you. So that's Anthony, the scorned cupcake eating Anthony SanFilippo. You can find on Twitter at AntSanPhilly. I'm also upset that you ate a Hostess instead of a tasty cake. I ate
what was available.
That's gonna stick with. You know what, Anthony? That's not a good enough excuse, man. Like, if you were presented a can of Raviolios that you jibed me on in the beginning of the episode, you're going to tell me that you would eat that can of Raviolios? I don't know if you would.
I would not eat the can of Raviolios.
Well, then, I expect you to show a little bit better discretion in your baked goods. So, there's that. This is going to be a conversation off air that we're going to have. We have to hash this one out. So anyway, for Anthony at AntSanPhilly, I'm Russ at Joy on Broad, and we will talk to you again next week.
Later.